John, you're very welcome. John, what is your experience in working with a school, club and county, and what role does the school have in the development of the player?
Well, thanks, Tony. I've had loads of experience now, to be honest, with school, club and county. Lots and lots of sort of different experiences, and hopefully they're not all finished yet. Started off in school. My first job was up in Edmund Rice College, up in Belfast, up in Glengormley, and that's where I started coaching initially. But like what Aaron's saying there with the club, our sort of whole sort of ethos is to try and sort of keep as many people participating as possible. So that's something I've brought through from there, is to, especially in school, is to try and get as many kids competing as possible and at their own level as well. So we would very rarely cut panels in school. We would keep as many lads as involved as possible. So after that, I moved to St Mary's Marifelt, which is where I'm at now. So we've had good success there. Lots of good days, lots of bad days, I suppose, with any club or any team. Club-wise, it's been all fairly circumstantial, to be honest. I used to live in Belfast with Seamus Downey as a student. So when I'd finished playing, Seamus asked me to come and give him a hand in Lavey. His uncle is John Brennan. He took me then over to Slough for a couple of years. Then we moved back to Loch Macrory here in Tyrone. So I was involved with Oma for a while, then Loch Macrory, senior team as well, where I'm living. I'm from Killyclogher, so I ended up in Killyclogher, and I did 6 years there. We had a great 6 years now with plenty of good success. And now I'm with True in Monaghan, which is just over the border here from Tyrone. I was with Donegal in 2018, and I was also involved in the following year with the Tyrone under-16 academy team. So I've had more clubs than Tiger Woods, as it'd say. So lots and lots of different experiences, and it's all been really, really good. And every one of them has complemented the other. You're always learning. There's so many elements to the game, and it's got so scientific now, and it's got so specific. Lots and lots of changes, but my sort of underwriting sort of thing is, you're only ever as good as a coach as the players that you have at your disposal. It's all down to the players. Coaches just facilitate the process, facilitate the performance, as far as I'm concerned. So that's my experience. Was there another part of the question, Tony?
Well, briefly, John. What role does the school have in the development of the player? Just briefly,
Right. Sorry. The school, massive role, and I think the school's a very sort of unique environment, in that we have access to the players for 7 or 8 hours a day. Really, we see them all day. We have them all year long, and we have them for 7 years mostly in a row. So you've got loads and loads of opportunities to sort of make an imprint on the players and make an impression on them, and teach them those sort of lessons that are so valuable in our games. So I think the schools prepare. It's another part of the pathway, and it prepares the pupils for boys and girls, prepares them for club, prepares them for county, and prepares them for elite sport. And they're exposed to lots and lots of good practice in schools as well.
That's absolutely brilliant, John. We're on to Mark now. Mark Poland from Down, a man who had a great career with his county and captained them, as Jimmy said. Mark, very welcome. Any tips on how you get the best out of the modern day player?
Thanks, Tony. Jeez, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
It is. It definitely is, Mark.
Jeez, put me on the spot here, but I suppose the big thing, Tony, from my perspective, would probably be in making it as enjoyable as possible. I think with it down, things have maybe got a wee bit too serious this past while, and trying to, the fun element needs to be there. People need to enjoy going to training and things like that there. I suppose from a coaching side of things, you're probably trying to create a culture that sort of cultivates positivity, and that you're getting in and everything's positive, and as a manager or a coach, being open and honest with your players. Everybody's probably a different sort of scenario. You maybe have your players who are sort of have their place in their team, but the other players who are maybe suffering, you need to have a wee bit of empathy. So I think it's about, you know, obviously trying to keep people, players as happy as they can, but, you know, bring a real enjoyment to your training, have things set out. Like, players nowadays don't suffer any fools, I suppose, as well, you know, and, you know, all have the one target and have this mindset of where you're going with your team, you know. I was actually come across an article there from like a young German coach who actually says to, you know, they get the most out of a modern day player. His coaching sort of philosophy was that it's 70% of it was social competence, keeping people happy and making them enjoying it, and 30% of what actually happens on the coaching field, you know. So look, that's just sort of a brief thing that I'd be looking at, I suppose. And as I say, it's a tough question to answer because it's hard to keep everybody happy.
You've done a great job of it. You've answered it very well, Mark, and I couldn't agree more with you about that's how possibly it's the best way of keeping play. You have to put the arm around the shoulder. It's so great stuff, and we're doing very well here. Maybe we've a couple of minutes coming up because I don't want Jimmy to be on my back here 10 to 10, whatever. Aaron, back to you again, Aaron. What's your thoughts having athletic development at senior level, but not having it at underage level?
I suppose that's a really important question at the minute, Tony, that's out there. I suppose the best way I can describe it, to answer it, is with a senior team, and I suppose my experiences in the last number of years with working with the likes of Sligo and Donegal was when players have come into the senior setups and haven't, I suppose, went through, I suppose, a structured program in athletic development, they're not as resilient, or they're not as robust to cope with the demands. And that's not only just, I suppose, inter-county, that's club football as well, but they're not, I suppose, robust or resilient enough to cope with the demands that are thrown at them. And very often they're expected to come into senior level sport at the club and county level, and it's just expected to meet the demands of that standard. So they don't become resilient enough, they don't come in robust enough, and they end up breaking down. So when you go right back through the chain, I suppose, as they're growing and they're maturing, we have to have a little bit of respect for them as well. And I always say, as a coach, empathy and perspective are two massive things for me. And if I look at a young player, you know, we look at in Donegal, we look at, you know, growth and maturation, and we can look at maybe a thing called peak height velocity, so which is the fastest stage of growth within adolescence. And that often happens for males about 12 to 14 years of age, and maybe females. Most of my research is in males, but females, I think, it's 11 to 13. And within that stage, there's an optimized window where we can really hammer athletic development with these players and really get them to, I suppose, develop strength qualities, speed qualities, and really enhance their athletic capabilities. But if we miss that window, we're always chasing after that. And like there's loads of research to show that, you know, when they come out of that peak height velocity stage, or that the fastest rate of growth stage, you know, speed starts to diminish over the years. So we really need, I suppose, use that time. It's very simple for even clubs to go in and look at that, you know, simply by taking height, weight, seating height, look at the gender and date of birth, and there's loads of equations I'm happy to send on after this, where you can actually just predict what stages of growth and maturation that those players are in, because I suppose how we program athletic qualities at those young ages is very different depending on what stage you're in. But as I said, empathy is very important, because we need to realise when they're young players developing, they're going through a lot, I suppose, in terms of a growing perspective, and the fatigue could be very high. And I often hear coaches asking me, in terms of, you know, when they're trying to do athletic development with young players, is why are they always look tired, or why are they always, they don't look an unfit under 12 or an unfit 13-year-old. Have a little bit of empathy for them, because they're going through massive different changes within their body, and it's like a baby. The fastest stage of growth is when we're born as a baby, so we're always sleeping. It's the same. They're going through a similar stage between 12 and 14, where they're constantly, I suppose, going through a growth spurt. So we have to, I suppose, have a wee bit of empathy for them as well. But in terms of, we have to try and make them a little bit resilient and robust, and that's just going through strength and conditioning modalities from, I suppose, 12, 13, 14. And I suppose I would keep it at that age, maybe very moderate. And as they get towards maybe 16, 17 and upwards, they can make it a little bit more structured. And I suppose maybe more designated strength and conditioning sessions when they get 16, 17 and up towards senior. But maybe the way to nail it. And a wee bit younger than that, maybe from 12 upwards, and use your warm-ups, bring it into pitch sessions and the activities of pitch sessions as well. But I think it's so important, because if they don't have the base of work done by the time they reach senior level, they're not going to be able to cope with the demands, and they're not going to be robust enough, or they're not going to be resilient enough to play their sport.
Absolutely brilliant, Aaron. Brilliant stuff. Now we're going to move on to John. John, this is maybe a tricky question. How can the schools, and clubs and academies be better aligned?
Well, I think that is a tricky question, Tony. All right. I think the most important thing in terms of looking at the alignment between schools and the clubs and the academies is communication. I think that's key. What Aaron's saying there in terms of strength and conditioning, there's very specific stuff going on at academy level and at county level, and that's stuff that schools, and clubs need to really sort of tap into. That sort of athletic development, and sort of making sure that the kids are being trained properly. So communication is really important, because all three areas complement each other. They really have to. And it's all about, improving the player. And, Mark hit the nail on the head earlier when he said about enjoyment. And that's massive. The boys and the girls, the kids, the players have to enjoy what they're doing. They can't get a sickener. They can't be pulled between three stools. We really have to look at the big picture here. Our example in St Mary's, we're very lucky in that we have a really good relationship with the Games Development Officer, Chris Collins, there in Derry, with the academy coaches and with the clubs. Because I think we all sort of see that, it's for everybody's mutual benefit, improving the players and having the players enjoying what they're doing and being keen. It's in everybody's best interest. And that's what it's all about. It's developing the players. It's about developing the individual. And, there's a lot of talk about burnout. And, I would say, it's more to do with sickening a lad, pulling them between three stools, and maybe having a schools game during the day, or a tough training session. Maybe he's going to a 4G pitch to do an academy session. Maybe he's back in the gym the next day. So we've got to be sort of mindful of their load. We've got to be mindful of their recovery, and we have to have a good understanding. And it's all about building these relationships. Really, really important, and making the player, the pupil feel valued, because at the end of the day, clubs, schools, academies, we all have a duty of care for these kids to make sure that they're being looked after.
Brilliant, John. Absolutely brilliant. Mark, we'll go on to you now, Mark. And possibly when I look at this question, it sort of half relates to myself, because I didn't get a Derry minor football trial back in the time at all. I never got a call up. In fact, I played hurling for the Derry Miners before I didn't play football till I was 21 for Derry. Is there room for a player that doesn't make academies or minors?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You could say, Tony, now that it's sort of the academies and even the minors going down to 17s, that you're probably not even started your journey. I do think they're beneficial, as Aaron was saying there, in terms of athletic development, and that some of them mightn't be getting any of that work, at their club level. Some clubs might already be ahead of the pack, and that. I find that they're a great experience for lads from different clubs to come together and, get the opportunity to actually compete at the highest level, but against other players from different counties and whatnot. Going back to your question, a good friend of mine, Ambrose, never played minor football. 2 years later, after he left the minor age group, he was in the Down senior panel, and the career he had then after that. And there's a couple other players that I would have played senior football with, Danny Hughes and a few others, who never represented their county at minor level either. But look, as I say, I've been involved with the development squads, and about 6 or 7 years ago, there was one wee lad who caught my eye at a couple of sessions, but struggled with size and with other things as well. And I was always going, will he develop in the right way? And he's in the Down senior panel now. He's turned into absolutely a machine as such, I think it just gives the young lads an insight in what it takes as well to play at that level. But to me, there is room for young lads who don't make it. It definitely isn't the be all and end all. And I think that's one of the toughest things being involved in academies and development squads too. When maybe you have to make cuts and there's so many people coming together to impress and that there. It's one of the worst things, and even at minor level as well when you're having to cut panels, because them young lads obviously are very, very disappointed, and they probably don't feel. You're trying to give them encouragement, and that there is always a chance to come back. But look, it's it definitely, in my opinion, it's not even the start of your journey. But yeah, look, that's the way it is. Like,
well, brilliant. Mark, when you say Ambrose, is that Ambrose Rogers you're talking about?
Yeah. Ambrose never made any of the minor squads, because I would have played minors 2 years and Ambrose would be a year ahead of me, So he never made the minors in his last year, and then 2 years later he was in Paddy O'Rourke took him into the senior squad, and then he was captain of the under-21 team. We actually got an All-Ireland final in 2005. So from not even making a minor squad 3 years later, he's captain, or 2 years later, he's captaining an under-21 team in an All-Ireland final. And I think he actually made his senior championship debut that year against Tyrone and Oma as well. So it just shows you,
Brilliant story, Mark. Brilliant story. It just shows you, absolutely. And you're right, it's not the be all and end all if you even get on an academy squad. But yes, they're an important part of the development. I know they are, definitely. You have to look out for the talent at that age level too. Yeah. Brilliant, Ben. We're flying here. We're flying. We have, I think, Jamie will still give us 10 minutes, so we have a couple of 3 minutes each here, and we'll maybe get another question on each of us here. So brilliant stuff. Back to Aaron again. How can the player integrate the athletic development into their work and training, Aaron?
Yeah, well, just to come in the back of what Mark was saying there, for a player, I think how do we integrate all this into their training is, first off, from coaches, we have to, I suppose, educate them on athletic development. And just something that you touched on, Mark, there was about early matures and late matures. Sometimes when we look in a system of the longer you can keep a player within an academy, the late mature, the longer there's more research, and Des Ryan and Arsenal can show this, the longer they stay in the academy, the more that there's the more research to show that they're going to be successful long term. So we need to, suppose, educate the players that with their athletic development they need to be consistent, because the longer they can stay in that system, the more that they're going to come through. Because very often that early mature, if we look at from four different entities, maybe psychosocial, technical, tactical, and physical, that early mature just puts all their eggs in the basket of the physical, whereas the late mature has to come technically better, tactically better to compete. So as they start to progress up the chain, then they'll end up being more successful. So I suppose that's education is the first one, that if there is lads in that academies that are, I suppose, late developers, keep them in the system and keep them working and keep educating them. From a practical point of view for players, and I suppose me as a strength and conditioning coach, even when we're working with Donegal, as the season progresses, you get less and less time with the players because the football takes over, and rightly so. That's the sport we play, or the hurling takes over. So for me, it's warm-ups. That's where we literally try to utilize all these different qualities. And if you think of it, if you're doing 2 to 3 warm-ups a week, if there were 10 minutes, that's 30 minutes a week on this athletic development work. Put that over a month and so on. And if you nearly turn them into mini training sessions, your warm-ups into mini training sessions or mini stimulus sessions, where you can go through, I don't really look at exercises, we look at movement. So how can we squat? How can we push? How can we pull? How can we hinge? We can do all that in the warm-up. Same with them with their speed development work. We can do all those qualities in the warm-up. And that, I suppose, for even the club coach who probably thinks, I don't have a gym, how do I do this with my player? Bring all those qualities into your warm-up. And I know the Activate you have, the Ulster GAA, but that was a fantastic resource. One of the other ones that we've been looking at the minute in Donegal is we've been talking with Professor Kevin Till in Leeds Beckett University, and they've released a platform for sessions called Rampage. It's a really, really good tool if you want to look it up. Happy to answer any questions on it again after this.
Aaron, thank you. Thank you so much. Right, Mark, on to you here. Any advice on how you can improve playing standards within a club? I think that's a good question.
Playing standards within a club. Well, I suppose, Tony, nowadays most clubs have a coaching pathway, and a lot of them would have their own sort of coaching philosophy. Suppose you'd have to take that in stages as well, you know, from the kids in the nurseries the whole way up through. But look, I'll go back to it again, and I'll go back to the fun element on it. And to me, like before 14, 15 years of age, it should just be skill development the whole way. You know, ball-sided games in your training, having good coaches within your club, and you know, if not, getting them coaches to, you know, different courses, and you know, trying to sort of broaden the coaching horizon, I suppose, within your club. You know, look, if we all knew the answer to that, it would be great, like, you know. But yeah, look, make it as fun as possible. Like John touched on the point there too about, you know, maybe you know, young people coming through the club too. Like you want them to feel, you know, as if this club is theirs as well. Because just because they mightn't be the best footballer, hurler, or camogue or whatever, doesn't mean that they don't have a job within their club. Like they could be an administrator or whatever further on down the line. But in terms of, you know, playing and that, there, like, you know, try and get as many coaches, you know, experience within your club, and so they have the confidence, you know, to deliver a good session, and, you know, give them that aim of, you know, one day hopefully playing for your senior team, whether that is in hurling, football, or camogie. So yeah, look, that's what I would say about that, you know.
Brilliant, Mark. Brilliant. Thank you, Mark. John, what level of preparation would the players go through for the school competitions?
Oh, well, you know, I suppose when it comes to McCrory level, Tony, you're probably talking about 7 years of preparation, and it sort of just brings us back to the point that the boys were making about maturation. You know, and the point that I made earlier on, that we have these kids, we have these lads in school and the girls for 7 years in a row, so they all progress at different levels, and they mature at different levels. And a lad that mightn't make a team in first or second year could be your best McCrory player, and we've seen that happen. In terms of level of preparation, well, at McCrory level or at senior level in any school, I mean, it's fairly elite. It's got fairly elite with, you know, the science that's out there, and the sort of the progressions that have been made in strength and conditioning, all the work that they're doing with their academies, and all the work that they're doing with their clubs, and it all comes together in school. I mean, we sort of sat down and created a plan a few years ago, because we'd sort of never won this elusive McCrory Cup. We'd got to a final in 2003. We'd got to several semi-finals, could never get over the line, and we thought, you know, we would bring in a bit more expertise, a bit more help. So we employed a Gaelic development coach in school, maybe one of the first schools to do it. We brought in Ronan Devlin, and Ronan did a brilliant job, so much so that he's teaching in the school now. We brought in Johnny McGurk then, and, you know, we'd Mickey McCullough, the hurling coach, in for a while as well. So those boys have brought in great expertise and are able to help us out, because, you know, any school, you don't maybe have as many coaches or as many teachers involved, but you've lots and lots of teams. But in terms of our preparation, you know, it wouldn't be a million miles away from a really good club setup or an inter-county setup, to be honest. You know, we run trials, we look at periodizing training, we look at nutrition and hydration protocols. I mean, you know, if we're not sure ourselves, we'll bring Ryan Mellon, has come in the past and give us presentations from Ulster GAA there. Obviously, the boys are getting well informed about strength conditioning. We have a strength conditioning suite in the school, and we're able to help them with that and guide them with that. We talk to them about rehab and recovery. You know, there's hopefully decent coaching going on in school there as well. Team meetings, analysis software. I mean, you name it. And then the games themselves and the experiences that the boys get themselves. If anybody's been to a St Mary's Mahara derby, you know, you're playing in front of a big crowd, and it's hell for leather. And you know, that's all good in terms of their development as well. So, you know, there's lots of preparation goes on in schools, which, you know, as I said earlier on, you know, can complement what happens in the clubs and what happens in the counties.
John, absolutely brilliant. And do this, and I see a few questions on there in the chat box. I think our time is nearly up, coaches. Because we have a tight schedule all day here. But before we finish, I must thank the three men. It's been an honour, a real honour for me to interview you three men who's embedded in the GAA and Ulster here. And as I say, it's a privilege and an honour for me. And thank you so much. So to Aaron, to John, and to Mark, thank you and good luck in the future.
Thanks, Tony.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, lads. That was excellent. There are a couple of questions in the box, so I'll not get through them all, but I will ask one or two of them, if you don't mind. Aaron, what kind of exercise should kids be doing when in the peak height velocity window?
Listen, as I think I touched on when I was speaking during the talk, I wouldn't really focus on exercises. Let's focus on movement and getting them moving really well. When they're in that stage, maybe of 12 to 14, the structure of it can maybe, instead of being of it as pre-adolescence, I would say keep it very exploratory in terms of fun activities, or climbing, or bear crawls, or handstands, any type of gymnastic activity where they're expression strength. But in that 12 to 14, we can maybe make it a wee bit more moderate structure and really focus on those key movements in terms of squatting activities, which could be a double leg or a single leg, and like a lunge. We look at pushing activities, so it could be a push-up or a vertical push exercise or movement. We go into the pulling again. It's the same thing, as it could be a horizontal pull or a horizontal push. Loads of ways we can do that. So that might look like an inverted row or a pull-up. Or hinging, I suppose, really underpins everything that we do in sport. So they're different movements, and what I would say. But also, I suppose one other thing at that age is really critical is maybe some low levels of plyometrics, which is just our hopping and jumping, to really strengthen the tendons at that age, because as they progress through that as they get older, they really want those strong that they can tolerate maybe the running load they might have in a few years' time.
Okay, no problem. And someone has mentioned there the Sports Science Working Group and coach accreditation. Are you at liberty to divulge anything on that?
Well, look, delighted I'm on that group. I'm on that committee with Des, Ryan, myself, and Fionn Fitzgerald from Kerry's. Fionn's doing a lot of research at the minute in biobanding and growth and maturation. So myself and Fionn have come involved in that committee. We're only at the very early stages of it at the minute, so we're beginning maybe to look at writing a position statement for the GAA, and maybe look at getting resources out to club coaches very soon. So it's only in the early stages at the minute.